During this global pandemic and era of social distancing, I've been doing my interviews from home. This is where I spoke with Toby, who is a foreign correspondent for our network here in Washington, D.C. He's also reported from the front lines of conflicts around the world.
When I first moved to Colombia, it was actually much more violent then. And then it would be a question of, I've always lived in Bogota. And when I first moved there, it was car bombs were going off around the country. And I would get phone calls from my mother that, Toby, the BBC is reporting a car bomb in Buenaventura. I was like, all right, Mum, but that is 900 miles away from me. I appreciate your concern, but don't worry. The blast hasn't reached us yet in Bogota. So I think, but she got used to it, and she did get used to it, I think. She understood that, and I think she rationalized it and came to understand that if anything was to happen to me, she even told me this one Christmas, that she understood I was doing what I loved. So if anything, if any misfortune did happen to me, okay, well, you know, he knew the risks and he wanted to do it anyway.
Toby is a British-American writer and documentary filmmaker. He has embedded with soldiers, rebels, and drug cartels, producing reports from cocaine laboratories and guerrilla jungle camps. He lived in Bogota, Colombia for more than 15 years, reporting all across South America about its endless drug wars. He's the author of the book Kilo, Inside the Deadliest Cocaine Cartels from the Jungles to the Streets. You write in the book that upon your arrival that the militias knew you were there and kept their eye on you the whole time. So, I mean, there's inherent danger. How do you gain access, I guess is the question. And does the fact that you lived there for 15 years, does that give you an opportunity, whereas another journalist who parachutes in says, I'm going to go and do this, they'd never be able to gain that sort of access that you got?
So in this case, I was a local community leader, was able to open those doors. They just speak to people, and the community leader wants the world to know what the situation is there, because she knows that this is just not right. She wants the world to know this is how we're living. This is why we grow coca. So she was able to kind of let people know, hey, this guy's going to be coming. Foreigners have turned up because Colombia's opened up so much to tourism in recent years. Some foreigners have made very stupid decisions about trying by themselves to go to these drug zones. If you're an average tourist, you're not going to end up where I ended up. You're not going to step out of your hotel in Bogota, take a wrong turn, and now you're in the middle of a coke field. That's not going to happen. You have to try to get there. And we've had it in the past when the narco militias do not want you there. They set up a roadblock and they say, hey, sorry, but you've got to turn back. Now's not the time for you to be in this territory. I was at a moment, which was a strange moment, when there were so many narco militias controlling not kind of eyeing each other up. No one was really in control, which is always the worst situation for these farmers. They always ask, if the state itself cannot be the sole power, give us just one narco militia. Because if there's more than one, then the war starts and the farmers always get caught in the middle.
For decades, Colombia's most powerful rebel group, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC, carried out a bloody war with a military response from the government. Finally backed into a corner, the group relented, and in November of 2016, FARC signed a peace accord with the government of then-President Juan Manuel Santos. The oldest guerrilla army in the Western Hemisphere had joined the political process. Soon after, the country's homicide rate fell to its lowest in 40 years. Santos was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize, and almost overnight, a conflict that had cost more than 200,000 lives and displaced more than 7 million people ended. But by 2019, that peace process was crumbling. So Toby, I liked everything about your book, but one of the things I really liked was the fact that you have this scene setter, this prologue, which I found fascinating. And suddenly the war's over, there's an agreement with the FARC, and you have this exchange with this young guerrilla. She's a woman in her 20s, and she lays down her AK-47, and she asks this haunting question, which I wrote down because I wanted to get it verbatim. Can you tell me, what does peace feel like? How do you live in peace? I mean, first of all, to hear that question and think about it, you know, these people grew up
knowing nothing but war, and then to kind of think, wow, this is such a heady time, so optimistic, and then boom, it just vanishes.
Exactly, and I think she was embodying a country itself trying to ask that question. Colombia itself didn't know what it was to live in peace. And I think you saw a country almost like, you know, those stories of people who live in prison and then they're coming up for the release day and they just can't handle life in liberty. And I think that's what the country was feeling. And this woman living in the FARC, her whole life would have been war constantly. She would have woken up in the morning thinking, are we going to run into a unit of soldiers? She would have gone to bed with her AK-47. And for her to try to imagine what that life would be like, she just couldn't imagine it. And I couldn't put it into words. That was the thing. I was just caught short. It's the absence of war. It's obvious. But if war's all you've ever known, it's not so obvious. And the country couldn't put war behind it. I think that was the sadness. It signed this historic peace deal. It was 50 years. It was the world's longest civil war. And the country just couldn't get over the war. It couldn't stop that war mentality. And we're seeing that. We're seeing, it's now 4 years, the very slow collapse of this peace process. Colombia is back at war. And the drugs, just as long as there is cocaine, that country will not know peace.
In 2000, Toby moved to Colombia to cover the country's civil war. At the time, a huge U.S.-backed effort called Plan Colombia invested billions of dollars in a massive effort to cut coca production in half in 5 years. It failed.
So you lived in Colombia for an extensive period of time. When did it finally dawn on you that you wanted to research and write this book?
When you're covering the news in Colombia, cocaine's always sort of in the background. When you're covering the politics, when you're covering the civil war was funded by cocaine. And I just felt that there was this whole wilder side, these wild characters that the rest of the world didn't know about. And I wanted the rest of the world to know how these people are, what they believe, how they came to this position in life. And that was the idea for this book.
And there's so many crazy episodes in the book. What's the one that stands out for you the most?
The one that stands out for me the most, there was a crazy story of this guy, well, a crazy story was spending 12 hours with a guy who works on the semi-subs as he's smoking copious amounts of marijuana, driving his way to the port and arguing with his girlfriend who's working in France over the phone, nearly gets us killed multiple times on a highway. We actually end up driving, he's so stoned, we end up driving on the wrong side of the highway on oncoming traffic at midnight. We only realize because a truck is coming straight towards us and high beams us. And I just thought, man, a lot of innocent people fall into the grip of the cocaine industry, but some real idiots fall into that industry as well. And this guy was one of them. And I thought, I felt sorry for this guy's boss. If this is the employee, how much this guy must screw up every single time. I actually ended up feeling bad for a drug lord.
In areas hit hard by years of FARC conflict, farmers were promised government funding to help replace illegal crops like coca with legal ways to make a living. But roads are still poor, making it costly to transport new crops like coffee, citrus, or cocoa. Colombia's poor infrastructure makes it appealing for some farmers to continue growing illegal coca, which is cheaper to produce and easier to transport than most legal crops.
So when you have a war, you've got one side fighting the other. But you point out that cocaine always finds a way to survive. It doesn't matter who wins. And so it really did thrive after this peace agreement. And you talk about your journey, and I'd like to get into that. You write, I roll into the land of lightning with a honey bear under my arm and a storm at my heels. The honey bear story is a great story, but I won't give that away. People should read the book. But describe that journey, because it's not an easy journey to get into this area where the farming's taking place.
So actually that line, I'm glad you highlighted that line, because this was my first book and I didn't understand. So you sign a book deal, you make these promises to a publisher about, I'm going to get you this. That's the book proposal. And then it sinks on you. My God, I have to deliver this book. So obviously there's the anxiety, the existential dread. And I was at a party for coca farmers. They were all getting drunk on a Friday night. They had been picking coca, the raw material for cocaine. We were far in the Badlands. We were about 15 minutes walk from the border with Venezuela. This is a zone controlled by the narco militias. Just chaos, total chaos. And they were all getting drunk. And on my iPhone, I wrote that line. And I looked at it and I said, I can do this. The book will flow from that line. And in fact, one of the narco militias drunkenly, about 15 minutes later, shouted out, "We should kill that gringo." And I still just didn't care. I was so happy. I had the book. I said, the book will flow. Obviously, I couldn't leave. It was Friday night. There was no, I mean, it's a dirt path. That's the only transport there. And so I had to leave the next morning. The guy didn't come through on his promise. I don't know if it was serious or not, but you know, the woman who was helping me with these connections said, "Hey, why don't we sit on this side of the party? You know, let's get you away from this guy." As I say, the guy never followed through on that threat. But being out there in the middle of nowhere, you kind of do understand where cocaine comes from. Imagine these farmers if they grow to get back to your idea, just the logistics of how long it took me to get to that place. It took 6 hours from the nearest town. The nearest town is Tibu, which is, I think, a population of 15,000. This isn't some big urban center. We would do 3 hours on a motorway, which had bomb craters in it because of narco militias fighting. They'll set up checkpoints, set off IEDs. We would get to the 3-hour mark in a taxi. We would get off, we would wait for a truck to take us on this dirt track because nothing smaller than a truck or a motorbike can get by. The road is in such bad condition. Then we would cross on a homemade ferry, a big river, which is planks of wood nailed onto empty barrels, which give it the buoyancy. Then it would be an hour on the back of a motorbike, which is a dirt track, which would cross these various bridges made of planks of rotting wood. 6 hours. When I looked on Google Maps to figure out how far it was as the crow flies, that was 30 kilometers. 6 hours to travel 30 kilometers. Now, let's reverse that and put a farmer out there who has a ton of pineapple. How is he going to get that to market? Without these roads and bridges, these farmers, these small farmers have no chance. Now, if he grows a hectare of coca, he can condense that into a block of coca paste, which is one stop short of cocaine. And he just throws that in a backpack.
He can get on a motorbike.
Get on a motorbike. He can do 2, 3, and everyone always wants to buy coca paste. Why? Because of the demand from the richest countries in the world, the United States, Europe. They want this drug. So when we try to ask these farmers to grow legal crops, I think they have every right to reply back, "Help us. What do you expect us to grow?" I mean, I went over these rotting bridges that were like 2 planks. How is a ton of pineapples going to cross that? It won't. And everybody knows it won't. So we either be mature and say we need to help these farmers by building that infrastructure, or we can't wait for a different outcome.
You obviously, once you get it in the package form where it's going to go to London or New York or Los Angeles or Washington, D.C., somebody's got to get on that plane with it, the mules. And they train almost like Olympians with grapes. And talk to us about their preparation to do this. And obviously, there's risk involved. Why would they do it?
Money. There's money. These people can be offered 5,000 euros just immediately, half on receipt of the cocaine, the other half when they arrive to London. It's a really sad story because at the heart of the cocaine trade is always betrayal. This is an industry that thrives on sex, murder, and betrayal. And you see the betrayal with these mules. They're always told, the fix is in. Don't worry, I've got a contact in the airport. Oh, we're going to make sure that the machine doesn't work. So there's a couple of instances. I interviewed a guy who was in prison, a Spanish guy, and he had been told that these capsules he was going to swallow are undetectable. And he's so convinced that he's asked to do an x-ray, and the police say, "You're under arrest." And he says, "What do you mean?" He said, your machine's broken. It's impossible. You haven't seen anything. So they do the x-ray again and show him. He's, oh God, why did I believe my friends? And it always comes for the friends. This is another thing I realized, that these people are always waiting for their friend to be in a bad state. They know, because they've heard you complain, you've got too many bills. Oh, really? You're behind on your rent? Hey, I may have a solution for you. And that's how you get people in there. And there's another scene where I'm there for the moment, where an American mule, 18 years old, is captured. And he was carrying 4 kilos of cocaine. That's a serious amount of cocaine, because the average mule takes around 1.5 kilos, often by swallowing it. They put them in condoms so they don't burst, but they still continue to burst. There was a Japanese mule who died. I mean, imagine the terrible ways of dying, but being at 37,000 feet and realizing something's gone wrong. You feel it, and you know that's it. You've got a kilo of cocaine that's now going to enter your bloodstream like a tsunami, and you just know it's coming. It's a horrible way to die. And in the past, what they would do is, they would often, to avoid paying the mules, they would sometimes kill the Colombians' mules when they arrived to their destination. This business is merciless. And the other betrayal they'll do is, will they send a single mule with perhaps half a kilo of cocaine, and they themselves will alert the authorities. Hey, this person with this name is trying to carry drugs. Oh, thanks for the tip. They're letting them know because they're sending mules with even more cocaine.
How's the pandemic factored into any of this, or has it had an impact?
It's had a massive impact because Colombia's had one of the most strictest lockdowns in the world, one of the longest lockdowns. So what that means is, it means it's that much more difficult to transport the cocaine that's made in the countryside, to get it to the cities. It's that much more difficult because there's such a reduced amount of traffic. It's easier now for the police to detect, this truck coming, we'll check it out. Because flights, because shipping has been much reduced, the reduction in commerce. So if you're exporting cocaine, it's that much easier to find it. Take the Eastern Pacific Ocean, which is the biggest, most important cocaine corridor on the planet. It connects the western side of South America, goes under Central America to Mexico. This is where those semi-subs are sent. This is also where they send go-fast jet boats laden down with cocaine, 2-3 tons of cocaine, and they'll go and dump the cocaine in Mexico. Well, they used to hide amongst legal shipping and fishing. With a reduction in fishing, a reduction in shipping, it's that much easier to spot these boats now. So I think it's had a tremendous impact.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.